What if the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing? In a world addicted to noise, explanation, and reaction, silence feels dangerous. But to a Stoic, silence is not absence. It is control. When you stop reacting, people lose the leverage they thought they had over you. They wait for emotion. They expect an explanation. Your silence denies them both. This is not about hurting others. It is about reclaiming yourself. When you stay silent, you step out of chaos and back into authority. You're no longer available for manipulation. Today, you will learn why silence unsettles them, reveals truth, and restores your power. You will see when silence is discipline, not weakness, and when walking away is the final Stoic act of self-respect. Do not listen with emotion. Listen with reason, because your silence is not empty. It is your power returning. Stay present, stay still, and let your absence speak louder than any argument today. 1. Silence forces them to face themselves. They did not hurt you accidentally. They hurt you because they assumed you would react. They assumed you would explain yourself, defend your intentions, or fight to be understood. Your reaction was part of the pattern they counted on. Most people are not afraid of doing harm. They are afraid of being confronted with it. As long as there is noise, argument, or emotional exchange, they never have to look inward. Your reaction becomes their escape. Silence removes that escape. When you say nothing, the familiar dynamic collapses. There is no argument to win, no emotion to provoke, no version of the story where they stay comfortable. Silence leaves only the truth of what happened. The human mind struggles with unresolved space. When there is no reply, no explanation, no reaction, the mind turns inward. They replay moments they once dismissed. They question tones they once ignored. They hear their own words without your voice softening the impact. You may believe your absence means nothing. You may assume they moved on without a thought. But silence creates pressure for those who rely on control. It removes distraction and exposes reflection. People who manipulate, disrespect, or diminish others depend on engagement. They need reaction to feel relevant. They need resistance to feel powerful. When you withdraw, their source of influence disappears. This is not punishment driven by anger. It is consequence revealed by clarity. Stoicism does not teach revenge. It teaches order. When you step out of chaos, chaos becomes visible to those still inside it. Your silence does not accuse. It simply refuses to participate. This is where emotional strength is tested. Every instinct urges you to explain, to correct the misunderstanding, to justify your feelings so they finally make sense to someone else. But every explanation keeps you emotionally tethered to the same wound. Silence requires restraint. Restraint is power that does not seek applause. When you hold your silence, something changes within you. Your thoughts stop looping through imaginary conversations. Your body releases the tension of anticipation. Your energy stops leaking into someone else's dysfunction. This is the beginning of inner order. You stop waiting for accountability from someone avoiding it. You stop bargaining with someone who already crossed your boundaries. You stop hoping clarity will come from the same place confusion was created. The weight shifts. They carry the questions. They carry the discomfort. They carry the unfinished narrative. You carry your dignity. Many people break at this point. They confuse silence with defeat. They mistake calm for weakness. They speak again, not from wisdom, but from fear. Stoicism teaches a harder truth. Peace is not granted by others. It is claimed through discipline. Silence is not avoidance. It is alignment with self-respect. As the silence continues, patterns become clear. You see how often your explanations were ignored. You notice how rarely being understood brought peace. You realize respect never required persuasion. And quietly, without confrontation, you change. You stop chasing fairness. You stop chasing validation. You stop chasing people who already showed you who they are. Dignity returns without announcement, not through victory, but through withdrawal. You feel grounded again, not because they apologized, but because you no longer need them to. Your silence closed the door they kept reopening. This is where real power returns, not power over them, power over yourself. Because when you stop reacting, you stop bleeding. And when you stop bleeding, you begin to heal. 2. Silence removes your value from their control. They did not take advantage of you because they were strong. They did it because they believed they had access. Access to your time, access to your emotions, access to your need to be understood. Control begins where access is unquestioned. When you explain yourself, you place your value on the negotiating table. You invite judgment. You ask for approval without realizing it. Every explanation says, "My worth depends on your agreement." Silence ends that transaction. When you stop explaining, you remove your value from their hands. You no longer wait to be validated. You no longer submit your inner world for review. You quietly reclaim ownership of yourself. This is deeply unsettling for people who thrive on leverage. Some individuals feel powerful only when others react to them. They measure influence by emotional impact. They feel important when you defend yourself. Your silence takes away their scoreboard. You may fear being misunderstood. You may worry they will twist the story. But Stoicism teaches a difficult truth. You do not need to be understood by those committed to misreading you. Silence protects your dignity. Every time you explain, you reopen yourself to manipulation. You clarify once, then again, then again. The conversation never ends because the goal was never understood. The goal was control. Silence exposes this clearly. When you stop responding, the power dynamic changes. They no longer guide the conversation. They no longer decide when you speak. They no longer dictate emotional pace. You do. This is not arrogance. It is self-respect. The Stoic understands that value does not argue for itself. Truth does not beg. The character does not negotiate. It stands regardless of reaction. Letting go of the explanation feels uncomfortable at first. Your nervous system has learned to seek relief through resolution. Silence denies that relief temporarily, but it replaces it with something stronger: autonomy. When you remain silent, you feel the pull to justify, to correct the record, to restore fairness. That pull is where your old dependency lived. Resisting it is where freedom begins. You start to notice how often you overgave clarity, how frequently you tried to be fair to people who were not, how much energy you spent managing perceptions instead of protecting peace. Silence cuts that pattern cleanly. You're no longer emotionally available for interrogation. You are no longer present for manipulation disguised as conversation. You are no longer explaining boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. This is the moment your value becomes internal. They may feel confused, they may feel frustrated, they may feel shut out. That discomfort is not cruelty. It is the natural response to losing unearned access. Stoicism teaches that control over self is the only power worth keeping. When you stop handing your value to others for validation, you become steady, not reactive, not defensive, grounded. Your silence says something words never could. It says your worth is not up for debate. It says your peace is not conditional. It says access to you is earned, not assumed. And slowly, you begin to feel it. A quiet confidence replaces urgency. A calm authority replaces explanation. You no longer shrink to be accepted. You stand. This is where your value returns to you, untouched, unargued, uncontrolled, and once reclaimed, it cannot be taken again. 3. Your silence is not passive. It is strategic. Silence is often mistaken for weakness. People assume that if you say nothing, you have nothing to say. They confuse restraint with surrender. This misunderstanding is why silence is so powerful. Reactive people move on instinct. They speak to release pressure. They respond to regain control. Every reaction reveals their position. Silence reveals nothing. When you stay silent, you stop playing defense. You stop chasing the upper hand. You stop broadcasting emotional signals. You begin controlling the rhythm instead. This is strategy, not avoidance. A Stoic understands that power belongs to the one who chooses when to engage. Words given too quickly lose value. Emotion expressed too freely loses authority. Silence preserves both. When you do not react, others are forced to reveal themselves. They fill the quiet with explanations. They justify. They escalate. They expose motives you would never have seen through argument. Silence creates asymmetry. You're observing while they are performing. You are grounded while they are reaching. You are still while they are unstable. This imbalance shifts power quietly. Strategic silence does not mean you lack boundaries. It means your boundaries are not negotiable. You do not announce them. You enforce them by absence. This unsettles people deeply. Those who are used to provoking reactions feel lost. They cannot measure your emotions. They cannot predict your next move. They cannot control what they cannot read. So they test, they push, they speak louder. And still, you remain unmoved. This is where true control forms. Not through dominance, not through intimidation, but through emotional economy. You spend nothing unnecessarily. Silence is a filter. It separates impulse from intention. It prevents regret before it is created. It protects your future self from your current emotions. Every time you do not react, you strengthen this muscle. You prove to yourself that you are not ruled by urgency. You show that you can hold discomfort without escaping it. This is a rare strength. Most people fear silence because it removes distraction. It exposes insecurity. It leaves nothing to hide behind. You are choosing differently. Strategic silence allows clarity to rise. You begin to see situations as they are, not as they feel. You respond from reason, not from wounded pride. You act when action matters. And when you finally speak, your words carry weight. Because silence creates contrast. Because restraint builds credibility. Because control is felt, not announced. You stop reacting to being seen. You stop explaining to be safe. You stop performing emotions for others. You begin moving with intention. This does not mean you will never speak. It means you speak on your terms. It means your words arrive measured and decisive. It means you are no longer pulled into chaos. Strategic silence is not emptiness. It is preparation. It is the pause that prevents mistakes, the distance that restores perspective, the discipline that keeps you sovereign. And slowly, people feel the difference. They sense the shift. They recognize the presence of someone who cannot be rushed. That is power, not loud, not aggressive, but unshakable. Because the one who controls their reactions controls the situation. And silence is how that control begins. It trains patience in moments where emotion once ruled. It builds trust in your own restraint. Over time, silence becomes instinctive, not forced. You no longer fear losing control because you finally understand where control truly lives. You become calm, deliberate, and internally unmovable. Forever. 4. Silence exposes who respects you. And who never did. Silence does not destroy relationships. It reveals their true foundation. When you stop speaking, stop chasing, stop explaining, something becomes impossible to ignore. Who stays and who disappears. Many connections survive only through effort from one side. Your patience, your forgiveness, your willingness to smooth things over. Silence removes that support. What remains is truth. When you go silent, Those who respect you pause. They reflect. They approach each other carefully. They seek understanding without demanding access. Those who never respected you react differently. They become irritated. They accuse you of changing. They call your silence cold, immature, or selfish. Not because you harmed them, but because you stopped being convenient. Silence strips away the illusion of mutual respect. People who value you for who you are will adjust. They will meet you with care. People who valued you for what you gave will resist. They feel entitled to your attention. This distinction is painful, but it is necessary. Stoicism teaches that clarity often arrives through loss. Not loss of people, but loss of illusion. Silence accelerates that process. When you stop engaging, patterns emerge quickly. Who reaches out with accountability? Who reaches out with guilt? Who reaches out only to restore control? And who never reaches out at all? This hurts because it confirms what you sensed but avoided accepting. That some relationships were built on tolerance, not respect. On access, not appreciation. Silence does not create this reality. It exposes it. Many people fear this exposure. They would rather stay misunderstood than be alone. They would rather keep explaining than accept disappointment. But Stoicism does not prioritize comfort. It prioritizes truth. When you remain silent, you stop rescuing fragile connections. You stop maintaining relationships that collapse without your effort. You stop carrying emotional weight that was never shared. This is where self-respect deepens. You begin to understand that respect does not need reminders. It does not require repeated explanations. It does not punish you for having boundaries. Silence teaches you this gently but firmly. Some people will walk away, not because you wronged them, but because you stopped giving them what they were taking. That loss feels heavy at first, but it is lighter than carrying disrespect. Others may return differently, more measured, more aware, more honest. Those are the connections worth keeping. Stoicism does not ask you to harden your heart. It asks you to stop offering it where it is mishandled. Silence is how you learn the difference. You stop guessing who values you. You stop wondering where you stand. Behavior answers everything. And in that clarity, something inside you stabilizes. You no longer chase reassurance. You no longer fear abandonment. You no longer bend to preserve relationships that require self-erasure. Silence becomes your filter. It removes entitlement. It removes false closeness. It removes emotional noise. What remains is a rare, honest connection, even if that means fewer people. Stoicism reminds us that solitude is not failure. False company is. When silence exposes the truth, you may grieve what you hoped was real. But you also gain something stronger. Freedom from pretending. Freedom from tolerating less than respect. You learn that the right people do not demand access. They honor boundaries. They adjust their behavior without being asked. And if they do not, silence gives you the answer without an argument. This is why silence is powerful. It does not beg for loyalty. It reveals it. And once you see clearly who respects you, you never unsee it again. 5. Detachment is the real punishment. They do not suffer because you stopped speaking. They suffer because you stopped caring in the way they expected. Silence alone is unsettling. Detachment is devastating. Most people can tolerate distance. What they cannot tolerate is irrelevance. They can handle anger, arguments, even resentment, but indifference strips them of meaning. Detachment is not coldness. It is clarity without emotion. It is the moment you no longer need a reaction to feel complete. That shift is deeply threatening to those who relied on your attention. When you detach, you stop rewarding behavior with emotional response. You no longer validate disrespect with engagement. You no longer prove your presence through pain. You simply withdraw your energy. This is why detachment feels like punishment. Not because you intend harm, but because it removes significance. People want to matter, even negatively. Anger tells them they still have an impact. Silence paired with detachment tells them they no longer do. Stoicism understands this truth. The most powerful boundary is not confrontation. It is indifference grounded in self-respect. When you detach, you do not announce it. You do not threaten. You do not explain. You just stop showing up emotionally. This creates a profound imbalance. They may escalate. They may prove. They may attempt to pull you back into reaction. But you remain unchanged. That calm exposes how much chaos they carried. Detachment is not numbness. It is freedom from emotional dependence. You're no longer tied to their approval, remorse, or awareness. Your peace becomes internal. This is difficult at first. Your identity may have been shaped around caring too much, around fixing, understanding, or enduring. Detachment feels unfamiliar because it is new territory. But it is also where healing accelerates. You stop scanning for messages. You stop replaying conversations. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Your attention returns to your own life. And that is when the real shift happens. They feel the absence of your emotional presence. Not your words, not your arguments, your absence. Detachment communicates something final. You're no longer available for misuse. You're no longer reactive. You're no longer reachable through old patterns. This is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. Stoicism teaches that emotional energy is finite. Where you invest it shapes your character. Detachment is choosing not to invest where there is no return. As you detach, your nervous system calms, your thoughts slow, your sense of self stabilizes. You stop living in reaction mode. This is where dignity solidifies. You no longer need them to feel regret. You no longer need them to understand. You no longer need closure from the source of harm. You have closed the loop internally. Detachment restores your authority. Not authority over them, authority over your emotional world. And once that authority is reclaimed, it cannot be manipulated again. You have learned that peace does not come from resolution. It comes from release. This is why detachment feels like punishment to others. It removes access without hostility. It removes importance without explanation. It removes power quietly. And quietly, you move forward, unburdened, unreactive, uncontrolled. This is the Stoic way, not to hurt, but to be free. 6. When to stay silent, and when to walk away. Silence is powerful, but it is not limitless. There comes a moment when silence has taught all it can teach, and staying any longer becomes self-betrayal. A Stoic knows the difference. Silence is for moments when emotions are loud, when words would inflame rather than clarify, when engagement would reward disrespect. In these moments, silence is discipline, but silence is not meant to trap you in place. If your silence is met with reflection, restraint, or accountability, it has served its purpose. If it is met with escalation, entitlement, or repeated violation, it has delivered its answer. Knowing when to walk away is the final act of self-respect. Many people stay silent too long. Not from wisdom, but from hope. They wait for change. They wait for remorse. They wait for someone else to finally see what they endured. Stoicism teaches that waiting for external change is a quiet form of dependence. Silence is not meant to be endured forever. It is meant to create clarity. Once clarity arrives, action must follow. Walking away does not require a speech. It does not require justification. It does not require a final message. Leaving quietly is not avoidable. It is resolution. You walk away when patterns repeat, when boundaries are acknowledged but ignored, when silence is treated as permission rather than warning, when respect does not return. At that point, staying silent is no longer a strength. It is the tolerance of erosion. A Stoic does not tolerate erosion. Walking away is not anger. It is alignment. It is choosing yourself without hostility. It is refusing to be present where your peace is consistently disturbed. This decision hurts, not because it is wrong, but because it confirms what you hoped was untrue. There is grief in walking away. Grief for the version you imagined. Grief for the effort you invested. Grief for the future that will not unfold. Stoicism does not deny this grief. It allows it. But it does not let grief override reason. When you walk away, you stop rehearsing exits in your mind. You stop waiting for permission to leave. You stop explaining why staying hurts. Your body recognizes the relief before your mind does. This is where freedom begins. You learn that silence was preparation and walking away is complete. No announcement is needed. No explanation is owed. Your absence speaks clearly enough. Those who respect you will understand. Those who did not will feel the loss of access. Neither requires your confirmation. Stoicism teaches that your life energy is sacred. Where you place it defines your character. Walking away is choosing not to place it where it is drained. This is not bitterness, it is boundaries in motion. You leave without hatred, without bitterness, without the need to be right. You leave because you are done negotiating with pain. And once you leave, something stabilizes deeply inside you. Your reactions slow. Your thoughts are quiet. Your sense of self returns to center. Silence taught you restraint. Detachment taught you independence. Walking away teaches you final authority. This is the Stoic arc. Not revenge, not dominance, but sovereignty. You do not disappear to be chased. You leave to be free. And in that freedom, you discover something unshakable. You no longer fear silence. You no longer fear endings. You trust yourself enough to walk away when the lesson is complete. That is mastery. Silence, when practiced with intention, is not emptiness. Throughout this video, you've seen how silence forces reflection, removes control from others, restores your value, reveals true respect, and leads to detachment and clarity. You've learned that silence is not weakness, but discipline, and that walking away when the lesson is complete is the highest form of self-respect. Stoicism is not about punishing others. It is about protecting your inner order. When you stop reacting, stop explaining, and stop negotiating your worth, you reclaim something essential: your peace, your authority, your freedom. Now the practice begins. The next time you feel the urge to respond emotionally, pause. Let silence create space. Observe what happens in them, but more importantly, observe what happens in you. Use silence not to manipulate, but to stabilize your inner world. And when clarity arrives, act with calm conviction. Thank you for staying present until the end. If this message resonated, take a moment to reflect, not to react. Share your thoughts only if they come from clarity, not impulse. If you're walking the Stoic path of self-mastery, discipline, and inner authority, stay with this channel. More reflections await. Until next time, remain grounded, remain deliberate, and let your silence continue to work in your favor.